Okay, 2.5, analytical reading and writing. Um, this one is aiming at you writing an essay, but you don't actually have to write an essay for this section. This section ends with a test. So for now, what we're going to do is just go over the steps to writing based on these works, um, so that you'll better understand what the essay is supposed to look like when you do get to the essay in number 3. Chapter 3 over here. See, narrative writing and language conventions, that's going to be an essay. Okay, so review of writing standards. One thing that popped out to me that might show up on the test is in your writing barrier syntax. Syntax is sentence structure. Uh, they might ask you what syntax is. They might ask you how to vary your syntax. And the idea is that essentially it's like sentence length and sentence complexity, using short, simple sentences and long, complex sentences, and then sort of bouncing back and forth between those to keep the writing interesting. Okay, so essay prompt. You'll read 2 short passages, one from A Raisin in the Sun, one from Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. Raisin in the Sun is a fictional play, um, and then Narrative of Life is an autobiography. So it's Frederick Douglass writing about his own life. Okay, let's just jump right into it. A Raisin in the Sun is about the Younger family. They are an African American family living in Chicago in the 1950s. They struggle with money. Right before this excerpt, Mama received a $10,000 insurance check. Mama wants to spend the money on a house for her family. Walter Lee, her son, wants to invest in a liquor store. Raisin the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. Walter enters in great excitement. Did it come? Can't you give people a Christian greeting before you start asking about money? To Ruth. Did it come? Ruth unfolds the check and lays it quietly before him, watching him intently with thoughts of her own. Walter sits down and grasps it close and counts off the zeros. $10,000. He turns suddenly, frantically to his mother, and draws some papers out of his breast pocket. Mama, look. Old Willie Harris put everything on paper. Son, I think you ought to talk to your wife. I'll go on out and leave you alone if you want. I can talk to her later, Mama. Look. Son, will somebody please listen to me today? Quietly. I don't allow no yelling in this I don't allow no yelling in this house, Walter Lee, and you know it. Walter stares at them in frustration and starts to speak several times. And there ain't going to be no investing in no liquor stores. But Mama, you ain't even looked at it. I don't aim to have to speak on that again. A long pause. You ain't looked at it, and you don't aim to have to speak on that again? You ain't even looked at it, and you have decided, crumpling his papers. Well, you tell that to my boy tonight when you put him to sleep on the living room couch. Turning to Mama and speaking directly to her. Yeah, and tell it to my wife, Mama, tomorrow when she has to go out of here and look after somebody else's kids. And tell it to me, Mama, every time we need a new pair of curtains and I have to watch you go out and work in somebody's kitchen. Yeah, you tell me then. Walter starts out. Still quietly. Walter Lee? She waits and he finally turns and looks at her. Sit down. I'm a grown man, Mama. Ain't nobody said you wasn't grown. But you still in my house and my presence, and as long as you are, you'll talk to your wife civil. Now sit down. Ruth, suddenly. Oh, let him go out and drink himself to death. He makes me sick to my stomach. She flings her coat against him and exits to the bedroom. Walter, violently flinging the coat after her. And you turn mine too, baby. The door slams behind her. That was my biggest mistake. Mama, still quietly. Walter, what is the matter with you? Matter with me? Ain't nothing the matter with me. Yes, there is. Something eating you up like a crazy man. Something more than me not giving you this money. The past few years I've been watching it happen to you. You get all nervous acting and kind of wild in the eyes. Walter jumps up impatiently at her words. I said, sit there now, I'm talking to you. Mama, I don't need no nagging at me today. Seem like you get into a place where you always tied up in some kind of knot about something. But if anybody asks you about it, Just yell at him and bust out the house and go out and drink somewheres. Walter Lee, people can't live with that. Ruth's a good, patient girl in her way, but you getting to be too much. Boy, don't make the mistake of driving that girl away from you. Why? What'd she do for me? She loves you. Mama, I'm going out. I want to go off somewhere and be by myself for a while. I'm sorry about your liquor store, son. It just wasn't the thing for us to do. That's what I want to tell you about. I gotta go out, Mama. He rises. It's dangerous, son. What's dangerous? When a man goes outside his home to look for peace. That's really wise advice. Beseechingly, then why can't there never be no peace in this house then? You done found it some other house? No, there ain't no woman. Why do women always think there's a woman somewhere when a man gets restless? Do you know what this money means to me? Do you know what this money can do for us? Mama, I want so many things. Yes, son. I want so many things that they're driving me kind of crazy. Mom, look at me. I'm looking at you. You're a good-looking boy. You got a job, a nice wife, a fine boy, and a job. Looks at her. Mama, a job? I open and close car doors all day long. I drive a man around in his limousine and I say, yes, sir. No, sir. Very good, sir. Shall I take the drive, sir? Mama, that ain't no kind of job. That ain't nothing at all. Mama, I don't know if I can make you understand. Understand what, baby? Sometimes it's like I can see the future stretched out in front of me just plain as day. The future, Mama. Hanging over there at the edge of my days. Just waiting for me a big, looming blank space full of nothing. Just waiting for me. But it don't have to be. Pause, kneeling beside her chair. Mama, sometimes when I'm downtown and I pass them cool, quiet-looking restaurants where them white boys are sitting back and talking about things, sitting there turning deals worth millions of dollars, sometimes I see guys don't look much older than me. Son, how come you talk so much about money? With immense passion. Because it is life, Mama. Quietly. Oh, very quietly. So now it's life. Money is life. Once upon a time, freedom used to be life. Now it's money. I guess the world really do change. No, it was always money, Mama. We just didn't know about it. No, something has changed. She looks at him. You something new, boy. In my time, we was worried about not being lynched, getting to the north if we could, and how to stay alive, and still have a pinch of dignity too. Now here come you and Benitha talking about things we ain't never even thought about hardly, me or your daddy. You ain't satisfied or proud of nothing we've done. I mean that you had a home, that we kept you out of trouble till you was grown, so you don't have to ride to work on the back of nobody's streetcar. You my children now. You my children, but how different we done become. A long beat. He pats her head and gets up. You just don't understand, Mama. You just don't understand. So there's a lot of irony in that last line. You don't understand, Mama. Because she does. She understands completely that he's valuing money above all else. But he doesn't understand her and what she's trying to say. And you know what? It's her money. That insurance money, maybe that's life insurance from Dad. Maybe Dad passed away and that's life insurance. But that $10,000 isn't Walter's. That's Mama's. And they got the grandson sleeping on a couch. They don't have anything, and she's trying to invest it in real estate, in a house, which is a very stable, very safe thing to do with money. Walter wants to be risky and try to open a business, play with money, which is, it could make more money, but it's riskier. It's way riskier. So their basic argument there is about values. What do you value? Do you value safety and security, or do you just value money? And he seems to value money above all else. So they have this conflict because of that. Okay. Excerpt number 2, The Narrative of Life of Frederick Douglass. In his narrative, Douglass shows what it was like to grow up as a slave, and how his passion for education changed his life. I lived in Master Hugh's family about 7 years. During this time, I succeeded in learning to read and write. In accomplishing this, I was compelled to resort to various stratagems. I had no regular teacher. My mistress, who had kindly commenced to instruct me, had, in compliance with the advice and direction of her husband, not only ceased to instruct, but had set her face against my being instructed by anyone else. It is due, however, to my mistress to say of her, that she did not adopt this course of treatment immediately. She at first lacked the depravity indispensable to shutting me up in mental darkness. It was at least necessary for her to have some training in the exercise of irresponsible power to make her equal to the task of treating me as though I were a brute. So he's saying that at first she was nice, and then the husband of the mistress, the master of the house, told her to stop teaching and that nobody should be teaching a slave to read. So she got there by degrees. She didn't just immediately shut it all down. She still had some, empathy in her heart. So it took her a while before she started treating him like a brute. The mistress was, as I have said, a kind and tender-hearted woman, and in the simplicity of her soul she commenced, when I first went to live with her, to treat me as she supposed one human being ought to treat another. In entering upon the duties of a slaveholder, she did not seem to perceive that I sustained to her the relation of a mere chattel, and that for her to treat me as a human being was not only wrong, but dangerously so. Slavery proved as injurious to her as it did to me. When I went there, she was a pious, warm, and tender-hearted woman. There was no sorrow or suffering for which she had not a tear. She had bread for the hungry, clothes for the naked, and comfort for every mourner that came within her reach. Slavery soon proved its ability to divest her of these heavenly qualities. Under its influence, the tender heart became stone, and the lamb-like disposition gave way to one tiger-like fierceness. I'll pause for a second because two things. He's saying slavery as a concept was what was poisoning her. The whole system of slavery turned her tender heart to stone and made her less holy, more evil. And then right here, lamb-like disposition. That he's basically saying she was Christian-like. She was walking the real walk that Christians are supposed to walk, and that slavery sort of beat that out of her. The system of slavery made her act less Christian. The first step in her downward course was in her ceasing to instruct me. She now commenced to practice her husband's precepts. She finally became even more violent in her opposition than her husband himself. She was not satisfied with simply doing as well as had been commanded. She seemed anxious to do better. Nothing seemed to make her more angry than to see me with a newspaper. She seemed to think that here lay the danger. I have had her rush at me with a face made up all of fury, and snatch from me a newspaper in a manner that fully revealed her apprehension. She was an apt woman, and a little experience soon demonstrated to her satisfaction that education and slavery were incompatible with each other. From this time I was most narrowly watched. If I was in a separate room any considerable length of time, I was sure to be suspected of having a book, and was at once called to give an account of myself. All this, however, was too late. The first step had been taken. Mistress, in teaching me the alphabet, had given me the inch, and no precaution could prevent me from taking the L. So that was the story of how he give him an inch to take a mile. The inch she gave him was a little bit of education, and he got this thirst, this hunger for education. Part B. Let's see. Part B explains how Douglas continued seeking education after Mistress Hugh decided to stop teaching him. Douglas makes sure that he is prepared to take advantage of any opportunity to learn. Douglas describes a book that impacted him during this time of life, and he talks about how his education was both a joy and a burden. Sorry. The plan which I adopted, and the one by which I was most successful, was that of making friends of all the little white boys whom I met in the street. As many of these as I could, I converted into teachers. With their kindly aid, obtained at different times and at different places, I finally succeeded in learning to read. When I was sent to errands, I always took my book with me, and by doing one part of my errand quickly, I found time to get a lesson before my return. I used also to carry bread with me, enough of which was always in the house, and to which I was always welcome, for I was much better off in this regard than many of the poor white children in our neighborhood. This bread I used to bestow upon the hungry little urchins, who in return would give me that more valuable bread of knowledge. I am strongly tempted to give the names of 2 or 3 of these little boys as a testimonial of the gratitude and affection I bear them, but prudence forbids. Not that it would injure me, but it might embarrass them, for it is almost an unpardonable offense to teach slaves to read in this Christian country. It is enough to say of these dear little fellows that they lived on Philpot Street, very near Durgin and Bailey's shipyard. I used to talk this matter of slavery over with them. I would sometimes say to them, I wished I could be as free as they would be when they got to be men. You will be free as soon as you are 21, but I am a slave for life. Have not I as good a right to be free as you have? These words used to trouble them. They would express for me the liveliest sympathy, and console me with the hope that something would occur by which I might be free. I was now about 12 years old, and the thought of being a slave for life began to bear heavily upon my heart. Just about this time I got hold of a book entitled The Columbia Orator. Every opportunity I got I used to read this book. Among much of other interesting matter, I found it in a dialogue between a master and his slave. The slave was represented as having run away from the master 3 times. The dialogue represented the conversation which took place between them, when the slave was retaken the 3rd time. In this dialogue, the whole argument in behalf of slavery was brought forward by the master, all of which was disposed of by the slave. The slave was made to say some very smart as well as impressive things in reply to his master, things which had the desired though unexpected effect, for the conversation resulted in the voluntary emancipation of the slave on the part of the master. In the same book, I met with one of Sheridan's mighty speeches on and in behalf of Catholic emancipation. These were choice documents to me. I read them over and over again with unabated interest. They gave tongue to interesting thoughts of my own soul, which had frequently flashed through my mind and died away for want of utterance. The moral which I gained from the dialogue was the power of truth over the conscience of even a slaveholder. What I got from Sheridan was a bold denunciation of slavery, and a powerful vindication of human rights. The reading of these documents enabled me to utter my thoughts and to meet the arguments brought forward to sustain slavery. But while they relieved me of one difficulty, they brought on another even more painful than the one of which I was relieved. The more I read, the more I was led to abhor and detest my enslavers. I could regard them in no other light than a band of successful robbers, who had left their homes and gone to Africa and stolen us from our homes, and in a strange land reduced us to slavery. I loathed them as being the meanest as well as the most wicked of men. As I read and contemplated the subject, behold that very discontentment, which Master Hugh had predicted would follow my learning to read, had already come, to torment and sting my soul to unutterable anguish. As I writhed under it, I would at times feel that learning to read had been a curse rather than a blessing. So, I'm going to pause for a second. As I writhed under it, I would at times feel that learning to read had been a curse rather than a blessing, because had he not learned to read, he might have been able to trick himself into being okay with slavery. He might have been able to just bear it and say, well, this is how things are. There's nothing I could do to change it. Might as well grit my teeth and bear it. But because he learned to read, he was able to see a world outside of what would be perceived as normal for him, and to see a better way. And now that he can see the better way, he hates the normal way that much more. Okay. It had given me a view of my wretched condition without the remedy. It opened my eyes to the horrible pit, but to no ladder upon which to get out. In moments of agony, I envied my fellow slaves for their stupidity. I have often wished myself a beast. I preferred the condition of the meanest reptile to my own. Anything, no matter what, to get rid of thinking. It was this everlasting thinking of my condition that tormented me. There was no getting rid of it. It was pressed upon me by every object within sight or hearing, animate or inanimate. The silver trump of freedom had roused my soul to eternal wakefulness. Freedom now appeared to disappear no more forever. It was heard in every sound, and seen in every thing. It was ever present to torment me with a sense of my wretched condition. I saw nothing without seeing it. I heard nothing without hearing it, and felt nothing without feeling it. It took from every star. It smiled in every calm, breathed in every wind, and moved in every storm. Okay, last paragraph. I often found myself regretting my own existence and wishing myself dead. And but for the hope of being free, I have no doubt but that I should have killed myself, or done something for which I should have been killed. While in this state of mind, I was eager to hear anyone speak of slavery. I was a ready listener. Every little while I could hear something about the abolitionists. Abolitionist was somebody who was trying to abolish slavery, get rid of slavery. So that's, if you're a slave and you hear about somebody fighting to end slavery, you perk up and you pay attention. It was some time before I found out what the word meant. It was always used in such connections as to make it an interesting word for me. If a slave ran away and succeeded in getting clear, or if a slave killed his master, set fire to a barn, or did anything very wrong in the mind of a slaveholder, it was spoken of as the fruit of abolition. Hearing the word in this connection very often, I set about learning what it meant. The dictionary afforded me little or no help. I found it was the act of abolishing, but then I did not know what was to be abolished. Here I was perplexed. I did not dare to ask anyone about its meaning, or I was satisfied that it was something they wanted me to know very little about. After patient waiting, I got one of our city papers, containing an account of the number of petitions from the North, praying for the abolition of slavery in the District of Columbia, and of the slave trade between the states. From this time I understood the words abolition and abolitionist, and always drew near when that word was spoken, expecting to hear something of importance to myself and fellow slaves. The light broke in upon me by degrees. I went one day down on the wharf of Mr. Waters, and seeing two Irishmen unloading a scow of stone, I went, unasked, and helped them. When he had finished, one of them came to me and asked if I were a slave. I told him I was. He asked, "Are you a slave for life?" I told him that I was. The good Irishman seemed to be deeply affected by the statement. He said to the other that it was a pity so fine a little fellow as myself should be a slave for life. He said it was a shame to hold me. They both advised me to run away to the North, that I should find friends there, that I should be free. I pretended not to be interested in what they said, and treated them as if I did not understand them, for I feared they might be treacherous. White men had been known to encourage slaves to escape, and then, to get the reward, catch them and return them to their masters. I was afraid that these seemingly good men might use me so, but I nevertheless remembered their advice, and from that time on I resolved to run away. I looked forward to a time at which it would be safe for me to escape. I was too young to think of doing so immediately. Besides, I wished to learn how to write, as I might have occasion to write my own pass. I consoled myself with the hope that I should one day find a good chance. Meanwhile, I would learn to write. Okay, so the essay is supposed to be a compare-contrast of those two bits. That play, Raisin in the Sun, and that autobiography of Frederick Douglass. Sorry. Writing essays can be overwhelming when you start. It becomes difficult to figure out what to write. Let's go back to the prompt. After you read both passages, write an essay that analyzes the similarities and differences between the two texts and the character's belief in the American dream. Use evidence from both passages to support your answer and develop a response. Okay, so neither one directly uses the phrase American dream. But let's look at Raisin in the Sun and what they think of as the American dream. Mama thinks of it as freedom. Freedom from lynchings, freedom to work, freedom to live where you want, freedom to buy a house if you get a $10,000 insurance check. Whereas Walter Leith thinks of it as being a businessman, running your own business, making more money on top of money. For my part, I side with Mama. Money's all well and good, but it sort of poisons the soul to seek something greater like freedom or family. That's where it's at. Frederick Douglass writes about freedom as well, from a different perspective. She's talking about it in the 50s, after the fight, and this is at the beginning, the outset of the civil rights movement. So she's looking for even more freedoms, freedom to vote unfettered, the freedom for equality, freedom of equality. Frederick Douglass is looking at it from as far away from freedom as you can get, born into slavery. And let's see, education and slavery were incompatible with each other. So the American dream for him is education. Being able to read and write and speak publicly, and being free to learn. So, what's different? Well, the similarity is freedom. What kind of freedom is the difference? And even then, you can compare and contrast Mama to Walter inside this play. You don't even have to compare two texts. There's two different perspectives inside this play. But to compare one piece of writing to the other, there you go. You've got freedom to live where you want and work where you want, and then the freedom of education. This is the difference there. Let's see what they've got to say down here. When you pre-write, you don't have to worry about grammar or spelling. You just need to write quickly, get the ideas. Give yourself 10 minutes to write down ideas. Now I'm good there. All right, let's go back up to the top. Essay prompt and outline. Okay. Introduction, body, conclusion. So here's how I like to think that you should start in the body and come up with your points first. So, like I was saying, your points would be freedom, the three kinds of freedom expressed. Freedom to be a businessman, freedom to live and work where you want, and then freedom of education. Those are the three main freedoms that they discuss. Each body paragraph will start with a topic sentence. The second component of the body paragraph is the evidence. So I would pull out a quote. I would go back and pull out a quote to support what I'm saying. I wouldn't just say, this is what Mama thinks, and just leave it at that. I would pull a quote from the essay to prove that that's what she was saying, to back up my assertion. All right, let's look at flashcards real quick, and then we'll be done. 8 of them. Compound sentence. Joins together at least two complete thoughts. Okay, so that's before he went to school, he played kickball. He played kickball with his friends. Before he went to school, he played kickball with his friends. No, that's still not two complete thoughts. Before he went to school, he played kickball, and he won a game against his friend. There you go. That and joins two thoughts together. That makes it a compound. Declarative sentence. Declares something. Declares a fact. So, like, that ball is red. Makes a statement and ends in a period. Exclamatory sentence. Ends in an exclamation mark. Ow! Exclamation point. You hit me in the face with that kickball. Hyphen is that sideways line that goes between two words. The sign that combines words into one word, like quickly fallen or loudly kicked. Interrogative sentence. That's like interrogation. You can think of it like the word interrogation. It's got a question mark. Proper noun, a capitalized noun, a specific person, place, or thing. Simple sentence has one noun and one verb. One complete thought. Clause is like a sub-sentence. It's like a section of a sentence that exists on its own, and you could take the clause out and the sentence would still work. Part of a sentence with its own subject and verb. Okay, looks like we're done for now. I'll meet you. That was it for chapter 2. So good luck on the tests, and I'll meet you in chapter 3.